I spent my formative years on sites like Newgrounds, Armor Games, Congregate, and many others playing Flash games. However, with the decline of web-based gaming a decade ago and the shutdown of Flash Player in 2020, many younger viewers might not be familiar with Flash games or the importance of that surrounding indie culture. Luckily, Flash games aren't some relic of the past, doomed to be forgotten. As I outlined in my last video, preservation efforts have made incredible progress in the last year, securing the history of Flash games and setting the stage for their revival. This video was motivated by some common points of confusion I saw in those comments, so let me start by quickly clearing up some terminology. Macromedia, and later Adobe Flash, was the user and software used to create animation and games. So when you hear devs refer to Flash, they mean the software used to create, even though it is now Adobe Animate. Thus, Flash games were free web games made in that software. These would be SWF or SWF files, and Flash Player, integrated into browsers, was what allowed all of those to run. Hopefully that helps you keep those straight. Flash, Flash games, Flash Player. If this video accomplished nothing but clarifying those terms, I'd be happy. Flash Player is what Adobe discontinued back in 2020. This was seen as the effective death of Flash, since the games would no longer natively run in browser, even though you could still technically create new ones. Next, I'm going to speedrun the history of where Flash started, why it became popular, why it nearly disappeared entirely, how it's now been saved, and where it might go from here. As a very brief aside, Beetle Ninja is available on Steam now entirely for free. Don't miss out on this charming indie RPG. It has multiple endings, many secrets to discover, and I'm thrilled that Two Left Thumbs was able to help bring that to Steam. And again, it's free. Go check it out for yourself. What have you got to lose? I'll have links down below. I'll share more at the end of the video. And we're back into Flash to talk all things Flash. Flash dates back to the early 90s. I'm skipping ahead to the early 2000s when it became a popular tool in web development. In those early days, we had Macromedia Shockwave, Future Wave software, and Java as web-based multimedia players. Shockwave was the basis of some early gaming sites like Miniclip, and is still the namesake for Flash's SWF files. Macromedia would eventually buy up Future Wave, rebranding and relaunching their Future Splash software as Macromedia Flash, while Java's over there doing whatever they've been doing. Flash was initially most useful for web design. It used vector graphics, which scale without quality loss, could stream audio and video, capture mouse and keyboard inputs, and allow for basic programming that all made for more interesting interactive web pages. When YouTube debuted, it even initially made use of the Flash Player to stream videos. Flash quickly grew to outclass Shockwave, with more advanced 3D rendering and the far more powerful ActionScript programming language. Shockwave and Java fell out of the market ages ago. Young creatives pushed Flash to its absolute limits, creating simple games in the program using its built-in language ActionScript. In 2003, Macromedia Flash MX debuted with ActionScript 2.0, truly unlocking the software's game development potential. It was both powerful and accessible. You could prototype the simplest concepts in minutes, hammering out release-worthy web games on a scale of days or weeks. Dozens of Flash game sites grew in popularity in the early 2000s, with Flash software becoming widely accessible on school computers at the same time. Kids like myself played these games, felt inspired, and could immediately attempt to make something of their own. Then there were lunatics like Tom Fulp, the founder of Newgrounds and The Behemoth, who was out there coding games like Alien Hominid and Castle Crashers in ActionScript, then using C++ to parse the game's logic to then run on consoles. While there's pretty well no chance these would actually run in browser, they were still technically Flash games. The original Binding of Isaac, Fancy Pants Adventures, while it takes a lot of additional effort to make a Flash game work at the commercial scale, it's been done repeatedly. It quickly became apparent that there was no real roof on what could be done with enough skill and practice, and those development floodgates were opened wide. The pools of both Flash game players and developers grew rapidly, with quality games releasing weekly and eventually daily, often earning millions of plays. While there were many classics that came before, I'd say it was around 2000 2006 that we entered the golden age of Flash gaming. Years of tutorials and forums helped hobby developers produce higher quality games. Collaborations between programmers and artists became more common and led to polished, engaging games that could be played and replayed for hours. With must-play games now releasing on a regular basis, ones that could potentially draw players to your site over and over, these Flash game sites now needed to compete for attention. This was done by either making in-house games that were exclusive to their site, or by sponsoring third-party titles. Pretty well anytime you see a website logo play in front of a Flash game, they paid to have it there. The more plays a game was expected to generate, the more that sponsorship was worth. Because developers were paid up front based on their game's expected reception, the scene was largely driven by quality and originality. Flash game sequels and franchises were incredibly common. Having some level of success and name recognition meant you could seek out higher sponsorships. Industrious developers were able to go full-time in this ecosystem. Some would sell 12 games in a year for a couple thousand each, while others would spend a year on a single game selling off the sponsorship in big 5-figure deals. Flash game development became all the more lucrative when rev share ads were integrated. These were commonly featured while your games were loading, and the internet was slow enough for loading to take more than 1 second, and were entirely skippable after. Yet with millions of plays, that could easily double a game's potential revenue. This period saw a burst of creativity with new genres and innovative games paving the way for future indie developers. Flash games had a distinct style, feel, and accessibility, something separate from standard PC and console gaming, shining bright for about 5 years before the free game market crown was challenged. Mobile games grew rapidly, from nothing to dominating the market in just a few years. It started with the App Store in 2008, but the dagger came with the addition of in-app purchases a year later. Soon enough, everybody on the planet had a smartphone, which carried a wider array of monetization options than browsers, and big companies saw a fresh opportunity to acclimatize users to the idea of paying for their free games. These new freemium games generated millions, and the ad-driven Flash revenue model couldn't compete. As this market was growing, Apple refused to support Flash on iOS. Couple that with the growth of HTML5 and Unity-made browser games, and Flash's dominance was further eroded. Adobe attempted to create Air, a cross-platform Flash player replacement that was created to address Apple's concerns over security. Adobe had to waste time and resources legally fighting Apple just to get them to accept Air on the iOS. It paved the way for other third-party development environments, but it stonewalled Adobe's ability to gain any traction on Apple's devices. Tom Fulp noted at this time, the end of Flash is coming. The writing was on the wall, but the timeline was unknown. I'm less clear on the cause of this, but in the early 2010s, many Flash game websites abandoned their personal identities and unique offerings, switching to a more homogenized style, layout, and features. I assume it was largely a cost-cutting measure, maybe it allowed them to slip in more ads, but it made these individual sites less worth visiting, and the web gaming industry continued to shrivel up. At this point, the identity and legacy of Flash was being chipped away at from all sides, including internally. With Apple refusing to budge, Adobe chose to then end support for Flash on Android devices as well. By 2016, Adobe had renamed the product to Adobe Animate, pulling away from Flash entirely and adding the ability to publish HTML5 games in their software. With the mobile explosion, waning support for Flash Player, and Adobe's rebrand, the identity of Flash games as a creative style and culture continued to dissipate. In 2017, Adobe announced Flash's end of life would come at the end of 2020. That meant no more support, distribution, and security updates for the Flash player. While I'm glad they gave everyone over 3 years notice, the fallout was still dramatic. Flash games worked online because they ran with the Flash player that was baked directly into browsers. But as browsers began to block Flash, decades of animations, games, and websites were at risk of being permanently lost. I have a a video from that time dedicated to Flash preservation. As Flash was left sinking, the Flashpoint Archive, formerly known as Blue Maxima's Flashpoint, was born. This standalone piece of software currently houses over 200,000 Flash applications. This was always meant as a shorter-term Noah's Ark solution, aiming to preserve as much as possible in case an in-situ solution was never found. Our long-term hope always rested in emulation projects that began alongside that end-of-life announcement. The most successful has been Ruffle, a free open-source emulator created by Mike Welsh, formerly of Newgrounds. It could be integrated into sites or installed on the user end as an extension for your browser. These are solutions that would work invisibly exactly like Flash Player did, but as a member of the Ruffle team shared in my comments, Flash platform development was very chaotic and nobody was planning anything. Flash Player was and is a total and complete mess. I cannot begin to enumerate how many times we've tried implementing what Adobe's official documentation says, only to realize that Flash Player does something different, and games break if you follow the spec. Or how much shit is just not documented, or was documented in a bunch of blog posts that don't exist anymore, etc. Ruffle development continues with regular updates improving its performance and the number of games supported. It's been an uphill battle, but with the official backing from Newgrounds out of the gate, Ruffle had an early foothold. This was followed by the support of other heavy hitters like Cool Math Games, the Internet Archive, Armor Games, and many more. Perfect emulation is likely still a ways off, but it's now a matter of time rather than a question of feasibility. If you want proof, head somewhere like Newgrounds, explore the games portal, search by most viewed or highest ranked, check different genres. There's an endless supply of classics out there to discover. This brings us to today. Flash Player is dead and buried, but the majority of the games are once again playable directly in browser, and that tool, now known as Adobe Animate, still exists to make new Flash games. I don't think Flash will ever climb back to the top, but with a little practice, you can create and iterate in that software faster than almost any other platform. It will always be valuable for game jams and the creation of smaller titles. I hope new developers rediscover how valuable it is to throw together a playable version of your idea in a matter of hours or days to work out some of the kinks before pursuing larger scale development. That Flash game scene was entirely driven by free-form creation and experimentation, producing things quickly and putting it out there to see what people thought. I hope to see more of that, throwing little games up on Newgrounds, cutting your teeth on development, honing that craft along the way, and building up to your larger game development goals. If you feel motivated to learn more about specific developers or Flash series, check out my own Flashlight videos. I do deep dives on the Flash scene, interviewing developers, and share as much of the history of Flash as I can. I myself was a teen set loose in a Wild West era of internet creation, and it's an absolute pleasure to share some of that with you. Which I suppose is a perfect segue to remind you about Beetle Ninja. This is a 100% free indie RPG made by Prosciutto Man and Post Elvis. The world is ending and you have 2 weeks to prevent its arrival. This game is designed to be replayed multiple times, recruiting new party members and exploring different choices to discover secrets and every possible ending. This elaborate title won 4 Misao Awards in 2020 and was the runner-up for Game of the Year. Often called the biggest sleeper hit of 2020 by fans, it's an absolute pleasure for Two Left Thumbs to be publishing Beetle Ninja and to be able to offer something of this quality entirely for free. Please do check it out, and if you enjoy it, drop it a Steam review. That helps out immensely. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you learned a little something from this video and maybe feel informed enough to try making a Flash game of your own. And I hope to see you again soon.